Welcome back to John's Briefs. We're here with Terry Johnson from Firearms Legal Protection. One that's hit all over the news right now is these red flag laws, or emergency orders of protection.
Correct.
Is what I've heard them called. So I have brought an expert in, an attorney, to talk about these. I'm very concerned about them.
You should be. We all should be.
And so let's talk about it. Today's video is brought to us by the generosity of Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners. You win the fight, and they will help you win the fight after the fight for the rest of your life. There's a link in the description for a coupon code for a discount for all active self-protection watchers. Terry, talk to us about why are these an issue right now?
Let's start with the basic premise that nobody wants guns or any type of weapon in the hands of someone that's not mentally stable.
Right. I mean, if somebody's going to use it to harm another, we don't want them to have it.
Exactly.
Or themselves.
Exactly. We pride ourselves on training and knowledge of the law, the whole 9 yards. And under the law, before your property is taken, seized, or anything, there has to be certain things that are put in place. For example, let's say you have a restraining order, personal protection order against you, and most of the time, once you get one of those,
you're prohibited.
You're done. You can't own firearms, you can't possess them, etc. But there is a hearing that takes place for that.
Due process.
Exactly. What do we mean by that? We mean that you go down to court, you state your side, the other person states their side, a impartial person, i.e. a judge, makes a decision, and you move on. Under red flag, this is what happens. Someone just makes an allegation against you that John Correa is a threat to himself, or John's going to hurt his family, or, John is going to shoot cars on the freeway as they drive by. That's all it takes. It's a report to the police. They go to a judge. The judge signs an order, and they go in your house and they take your guns.
So no hearing, no due process.
No due process. They take your guns, and the presumption of innocence is not upon you at this point. It's the presumption of basically guilt, and now you've got to come out and protect. You've got to come out, and now you have to fight to get back what the government took from you.
So this is an interesting thing that it's a quote that I've heard from a president. I can't think of who said it, but it was that we don't look at a law as to its intended effect. We look at a law's value as to its abuse.
Yes,
and
I've heard that before.
And okay, in its intended effect, if it's used for a crisis of somebody who is suicidal, or somebody who really is plotting homicide because they have that, and Terry, and you guys somewhat know that this is near and dear to my heart. I have had family members who have spent significant time inpatient and have had serious mental health challenges, honest suicide attempts. So this is near and dear to my heart. If it's used in that way, I think we might all say it's okay. But the abuse of that, this is this idea of swatting, right? When somebody calls in an active threat and SWAT descends on an innocent person's house and people get hurt and killed. Well, what happens when somebody does that maliciously to me? Oh, John Correa is an internet guy, and I don't like what he said, so I'm going to call his local PD and say he threatened to kill me with a gun, and now they're piling my guns, my expensive firearms, in a shopping basket. And how do I don't have any way to say, wait a minute, I had no due process, and yet I was deprived of my right to keep and bear arms.
And here's the other part of that that's interesting, John. Not only do they say that, but a lot of times they say, yeah, but the person, reports it and it's false, we're going to charge them with a felony. I have yet to see that happen.
Right.
Because here's the reason you're not going to see that happen. They don't want to dissuade people from coming forth doing the things that you want them to do. In other words, in the situation you just said, if you've got someone that's suicidal, yes, we want someone to step forward and make those reports. However, if they're wrong, and we've got people that have been punished, for example, they've been hit with a felony, they've been hit with fines or jail time, whatever, people are going to stop doing that. So judges generally do not enforce that. Prosecutors are not going to go out and say, hey, we're going to go charge this person that went out or went after John. Think of it from the standpoint of, again, a restraining order or personal protection order. someone brings it to the judge and the judge denies it, how many times have you seen the judge turn around to that person and say, okay, well, you're wrong and I'm going to make sure you get charged with a felony? It just doesn't happen.
Never happens. Never happens. And I get it. Judges are in a difficult spot too. You know, they don't have all the information. They got to do those things. But the lack of due process for any removal of rights, it's like being thrown in jail indefinitely without a trial, without facing your accuser, without that's.
Well, without any probable cause.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about the red flag laws is it will be over quick. So in some, it ranges between 3 and 30 days. That's the time you get to have a hearing. But I want you to understand what this is like. This is not a trial. Okay?
It's a hearing.
It's a hearing. So you don't have the right to pick 12 people that, you know, don't want to be on jury duty. Evidence, the rules of evidence are a little different in this. I'm assuming, again, depending upon the state, hearsay may or may not be allowed, which makes a whole difference there. And the other part of that you really got to keep in mind is there's really no appellate resources after this.
So, okay, God forbid I get charged, or not even charged. God forbid somebody says, John's a danger to himself, and, you know, the cops show up. Now, of course, I'm going to say, listen, don't have a gun battle with the cops. Let the attorneys work it out, right?
Well, and John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure your viewers understand this. You don't get a phone call.
Right.
I think there's one state I think you get a phone call, but the other 14 jurisdictions, they come to your house and they have a warrant. Imagine, you know, you're sitting down having dinner with your family and there's a SWAT team outside. And why do I say SWAT team? Because you have guns in your home.
Right.
And someone said that you are a threat to yourself or others. They're not going to come, you know, just knocking on the door.
Don't gear up and have a fight with the cops.
Right.
Not the time. Let it go down. I get it, and I get it's an egregious offense. Recognize that we can make that right later. We'd rather you be safe and alive. I would rather you make it through this, even as egregiously wrong as it is.
Absolutely.
But now then, I'm going to say, listen, I want representation. I want a hearing. This is wrong, right?
Well, yeah, but you again, depending upon the rules and things, you may not be afforded an attorney. And I want you to understand, this is not criminal.
Right. It's not
This
criminal
is
yet. Yeah.
It's quasi-criminal, as I
Wow.
like to call it. So your right to an attorney, you know, if you can't afford an attorney, want to be appointed for you, not in this case, because they're not charging you with a criminal offense.
Wow.
So a lot of your rights and privileges tend to go away.
So, as a firearms legal protection member, if I get charged with something, not even charged, if this happens to me and I get red flagged, what does that mean for firearms legal protection in terms of this? Because, I mean, it's not a defensive gun use.
Correct.
It's not a use of force. So, what do I do?
Great question. Well, what firearms legal protection, in order to make sure you're protected and your Second Amendment, your Fourth Amendment rights are protected, firearms legal protection is going to protect you under red flag statutes. Now, this might not be available in every state because we are, again, we've got to go into certain states and fight certain things to make sure that this is applicable, but we will protect you. You will give us a call and we will have one of our attorneys contact you and we'll pay for that representation.
I think that's an added benefit that gives a lot of peace of mind where these things are. And again, I can't tell you enough, and I know you agree with this, Terry, if you are struggling with thoughts of suicide, or you're struggling with harm to self or harm to others, we would certainly hope that you would voluntarily take your firearms to somewhere safe and get them out of your use, because number one, we value your life, and you
Absolutely.
are created in the image of God and of inestimable worth. So we would just encourage you to go get the help you need. And if that means taking firearms, then great. Here in Arizona, you can do private transfers, no big deal. And I've done that for friends in the past. Sure, bring them over, man. We'll put them in my safe as long as you need to.
Right.
We've had others where, we've had to go and talk with people. Hey, look, man, why don't you give those to us? And that is the correct answer. But if, God forbid, something like this happens to you, man, I'd recommend that you have some kind of protection so that the attorneys can at least fight for what rights they can and
Right.
give you some semblance of due process to keep this from becoming abused like this.
Yeah, and that's really the key, you know. I mean, a lot of people may say, well, listen, you know, I follow the show, but I don't carry. But are you a hunter?
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, it's not just handguns, it's any kind of long guns, handguns, any kind of firearms that you may have in your home. They're going to come in, and again, that's not the time to go up against the system by yourself.
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
not.
And what we're going to do on our webpage, you'll be able to go and see exactly what we cover and how we handle it. So just make sure you take a look at that as well.
Wow. Terry, thanks so much for the information.
Thank you, John.